Hello boys and girls, on this video I will be reviewing the 4th episode of Amazon's Little Fires Everywhere, and the episode is called The Spiderweb. So halfway through now, this one-off mini-series, limited series, whichever term you fancy. And this was a better episode than the last one, a big improvement actually. I think because it just settles down and it's more focused as a drama, and I think actually what's clever about it and gives it that sort of focus is then, because the majority of it, or the main bulk of the big drama, is focused on like the continuation of the Beb plot, with her trying to get her child back and obviously Mia helping her, and the conflict that provides with Elena. And I think what's clever about that in this episode is then, as that sort of spirals out of control and continues to like develop, I think it impacts like the rest of the characters. So it influences like the Richardsons, and then it influences also Mia's daughter Pell. So I think that actually brings all the characters together quite nicely, where the drama, that sort of drama of Beb and her baby, actually impacts the rest and kind of influences the other characters, if you like, in what they're talking about, their actions. So it actually creates some good drama between those characters, rather than them just having like these other sort of subplots to the side. I mean, there's a little bit of that, but not as much. It is more focused, and I think because of that, it does actually give the Beb plot a lot more meaning actually, because I wasn't really sold on it in the previous episode, but it's actually pretty strong in this episode in what it's doing. And I think, as I said, that this is a better episode because it settles down a bit more and stops, being a kind of issue-tastic. I mean, it is a little bit, but it takes a more gentler approach, and it just allows like the drama to sort of breathe. And I think obviously you've got a really strong cast, especially obviously the two leads. So I think that they really get a chance to shine. And actually, one of Rosemarie DeWitt, who plays Linda, who's obviously the character who took Babette's daughter in when she found her abandoned. She's obviously this really great indie actress who's you see pop up in supporting roles in films, and this is her episode where she really gets a chance to shine and show her acting chops. So that was really nice. So I'll talk about the whole baby thing first of all, because the episode opens in another flashback. So we actually go back to May 1992, and we get a bit of context about Linda's position in all this and why she feels so strongly. And that is because she previously had a miscarriage. We see her in the hospital after the miscarriage. Her husband comes in to like console her. So I think that's obviously impacted her in adopting or wanting to adopt Babette's child. And so we then cut to the present with Linda and her husband round the Richardsons, and obviously Bill is a lawyer, so has contacts, so he's preparing like a legal team. But the other sort of juicy thing we find out is that Linda and her husband are currently like in the process of officially adopting Beb's child. So that's a very interesting side to this, because obviously until they officially get that through and over the line, then potentially they could well have a challenge from Bep, because being the obviously the child's like natural birth mother. Now, the thing that kind of throws a spanner in Babette's, I think it's just Bep, but throws a spanner in her works is the fact that she is there illegally. So I think that's their biggest sort of argument, that being Linda. That, and alongside the fact that they've obviously raised the child up to now, and obviously Bep left it, and there's the whole money thing. They can provide for it obviously a lot more easily than Bep can, but it's a very murky thing, this, because obviously technically at this stage, if Bep's decided, then she does want to be a mother again, and she is, you know, the birth mother, then she probably has a decent case, but there are obviously certain problems with that. So we really get to see, as I said, Rosemary DeWitt's acting chops, because we really see how anxious she is and how concerned, how uptight she is in this sequence. And it's sort of interesting watching like the Richardsons kind of play off her, because they're obviously being supportive of her, but at the same time I think there's a side of them that maybe wonders, well, you know, this Bep may have a case here. Are you being a bit obsessive? But throughout the episode, it becomes a thing with Linda where she just like keeps like insisting that then Bep's not her mother. She abandons her. And it leads to this particularly strong line from her later in the episode, where she's like discussing this with Elena, where she kind of just sort of snaps and says she's not her mother, she's like an illegal alien, uses that terminology, who just left her to I mean, she says freeze to death, which is a bit extreme because she was inside the fire station. But nonetheless, she makes that point. But yeah, it's getting at these very kind of strong modern sort of terms. And I think she obviously is using like the phrase illegal alien in quite a demeaning way. And it's not the first time that Bep being like Chinese is like brought up, because and kind of used in sort of a sneering way, because I think Bill does it at one point when they're talking about it. But Elena, obviously showing loyalty to Linda, does some digging around, and the big thing is that she slowly like puts two and two together, and things start falling into place, where she realizes then there's a link between Bep and between Mir. She realizes that they know each other and that Mir's probably been helping her. One of the things that made it click was that she noticed a similar car to Mir that Bep used when she obviously went to try and get the baby. So she pretty much used Mir's car. So there's this slow building tension whenever Mir and Bep, you know, not Mir, so Mir and Elena are like in the same room, and we find out then Mir has been like leaving the house early, you know, as soon as the shift is over, to avoid really talking to Elena. But as I said, we do get some pretty good drama in this episode from this whole conflict, because what it builds to is then Elena goes to Beb's house and she tries to talk around, and what she does is she offers her money, and it's money from Linda and her husband, and it's sort of a bribe really, kind of, because they offer to pay for like an immigration lawyer, because that's obviously one of their big cards, the fact that then she's there illegally. So they offered to pay for an immigration lawyer if she'll just drop this whole thing and let obviously Linda and her husband keep the baby, adopt it like legally. But it's a really intriguing scene because some of like the phrases and how, and Witherspoon does a great job of like selling this, just how strategic she's been in this scene, Elaine, because she kind of gently says, I admire you to Beb, you made like the ultimate sacrifice, kind of playing to her like, you know, kind of, but that side where she sort of understands it, or appears to understand the decision, saying that you gave up your child because you couldn't look after it. You were thinking of her. And so she kind of then phrases it and says, I know you wouldn't do anything to harm her. And then is obviously making out then by trying to take the child away from Linda, you are in effect doing that. And it's actually a brilliant scene because I think obviously you can see what Elena is doing, but it leads to some great drama. And I think once she like puts the check out and offers it as like a bribe, I think that's when the ruse is sort of up. But up to that point, actually, I think it is quite convincing. And again, I think because Witherspoon is so good in the scene, it's actually quite believable. Then she is talking to Beb on like a human sort of level. And then things turn south because Beb basically calls her out on it and says, you know, you can't bribe me, and says, you know, she's my daughter, I want her back. It's not about the money or about this offering me this lawyer. And that's when things break down, and Elena just says, she's not your child. Take the money, take the lawyer. That's your only way out of this. So yeah, things are really really heating up on this front. Mia wants to help Beb. She wants to get her an immigration lawyer, but obviously doesn't have the financial luxury than the Richardsons do. But her one option is to sell some art, to sell some of her prints. And at one point she calls up, like, it must be like the woman who runs like the art gallery, and she says, I really need some money fast, I need to sell some art. And we find out then there's like this one special like print which, like, the woman says, you know, that could make some serious money. And it becomes clear that Mia has like an attachment to it, because she's like hesitant and says, you know, I can't sell that. So she's given this sort of like thing where the other woman says, then you better do some work, really. You better come up with some new stuff. That's the only other way. Either you sell that sort of valuable print, or you do some new work. So it becomes this thing where she finally caves in and sells the print. And I mean, that's one of the more melodramatic scenes, just because they linger on it a bit too much. Like you see her like packing the print away, and she's like crying. So it is quite a melodramatic scene. I think, as I said, just because they linger on it a bit too long. But I think the whole point is then it's almost like her compromising herself as well, because she's very principled and maybe sees it as like giving in to like the riches of like the Richardsons and people like that. But she eventually does sell it because she obviously thinks she's helping Beb out. So she finally gets her a lawyer. And that's kind of at the end of the episode. But there's a really great scene with Mia and Elena actually in like the kitchen where all this comes out. Because Elena kind of seals the deal in finding out that Beb and Mia know each other, and she does that by ordering like takeout from the restaurant. So when she goes there to pick it up, she sees them both there, so she knows, and the jig is up. So the next day they have this big like falling out, and it's just brilliant actually. It's another great dramatic scene between the two of them, and it sort of reverses it, because I think actually Elaine has been a lot more sympathetic as a character than I sort of expected, and likewise Mia has been more murky as a character than I expected. And this scene sort of flips that a bit, because we see the desperation of Elena, and we kind of see how judgmental she is. And she gets defensive when Mia like makes it about race. And Mia actually makes a very good point, and that is you made it about race the moment you offered me the job as like your housekeeper or whatever the title is. And basically Mia quits and walks out, and it's this whole thing, and it's a really good scene. She actually like wins that argument. Essentially, she does call Powell out on, or Elena, sorry, out on some of her bullshit, and it leads to further drama. Actually, she's open about the fact, I'm only here to stop my daughter from getting like corrupted by you, basically. But it's a really good scene, and it leads to further like sort of disagreements. So we see the Richardsons at dinner like discussing it, and they're really divided over it. You've obviously got like Moody, who's a bit more open-minded. He's kind of being quite practical and sort of saying, well, it is her baby and stuff. And Izzy, who's obviously a bit more counterculture and has been getting closer to Mia, which we see in this episode, she stands up for Mia and yeah, kind of puts that point of view. Then it's Beb's kid, and obviously talks about her struggle and the fact that because she finds out then they tried to bribe Beb, so takes offence to that. But that's another sort of subplot, that Izzy's spending a lot of time at Mia's, and is kind of being inspired by her sort of art, but also finds out that Elena told Mia about her being a lesbian, basically. So that sort of comes out. But yeah, we have this family dinner with the Richardsons where Elena's being like really judgmental towards Beb and towards Pell or Mia. I always get them muddled up. But it's pretty stinging stuff. It's pretty like awful stuff, because I think she really crosses the line in this episode, Elena, because she blatantly like dismisses Mia as like a bad mother and a bad influence on Pal, and because in one scene when she's talking to Pal, she's kind of saying, yeah, you're not your mother, basically. So she always talks up Pal as being a good sort of kid, but then dismisses her mother, like gives her no credit for that, and kind of she crosses a line, basically, no matter what the disagreement is, to actually like run the mother down and actually like claim she's a bad mother or something is, yeah, really sort of off. But as a whole impact, because obviously Mia's trying to like ban Pell from going over there and spending time with them, and she really embarrasses her, because actually later that night Pell's like really upset and goes over and goes to Elena, and she lets her like stay. And once Mia realizes that, she drives over in that late at night and just screams from outside, "Get in here, get in the car." So you're getting all these dramas from the impact of this. So you're getting some good conflicts, actually. And the ending's quite interesting, because they eventually hire this immigration lawyer. And so what happens is they start going to the press and the media, and they actually kind of use that to paint a picture about the background of Beb and her tough upbringing, and how she does struggle to provide for the kid. And it's actually interesting, because the media works to Beb's advantage and really puts the heat up on Linda and her family. And sure, it's kind of a tactic, but it's actually the media, although they're sort of hounding Linda, which probably is wrong. I think it's actually the media being used for good, because it is fair, I think, to point out Beb's like struggle as, a single mother, and the fact that she is poor and struggled to provide for her kid, and how that did motivate her decision. Whether you agree with this decision or not, you can kind of understand how she came to it. And so there's a very interesting like end to the episode, where they are sort of using the media to paint that story and to their advantage. And it's almost like full-blown war and battle lines have been drawn by the end, because like the very symbolic last shot is like Pell, or Mia, sorry, I keep doing that, like just like she does like this sort of like artwork, whatever, painting, drawing, whatever it is, of Elena, and she actually burns it in the bathroom. So they're pretty, so it's almost full-blown war by the end. The only other like big thing is the stuff with Trip and Pell and obviously Moody. So they go to like this Halloween party, and line of the episode actually, which was pretty funny, was Lexi, because of course she started sleeping with Brian in the previous episode, and she has a line where she says, I haven't got a zit since I started sleeping with Brian. Which is pretty great. The fact that she associates not getting a zit with having sex. But, whatever, she's still being really shallow, and they go to like this Halloween party. But there's a couple of subtle like reveals with Trip, actually, and I think ultimately it's sort of suggesting that he might actually be a virgin, or certainly that he's doesn't have this sort of experience he likes to make out. Because there's one scene where he's talking to Moody about the whole Pearl situation, and actually says, I think she's just put you in the friend zone. And Moody's like, where did you hear that term? And he's like, no, I don't know, I probably made it up. And that's actually quite a subtle thing where I think it's kind of saying then he's probably been put in the friend zone more than he cares to admit. And the other thing is that later on at the party, he's giving Moody advice, and the advice is just to play it cool, basically, and gradually like talk to her and stuff. And I mean, Moody doesn't take it, and he tries to give Mia Pearl, a gift, and again, Pearl's not really that interested. She's quite polite to him, but you can see her sort of pulling away, and obviously she's taken this interest in Trip. And the next day something happens, like she's helping Trip study, and she like kisses him, and then they go to the bedroom, and it's actually Pearl who sort of like pushes this, because she says, do you have any like protection? And he's like, oh yeah. But it's actually, they do pay this off nicely, because they go to the bedroom and they're like in the process of having sex, and when it cuts back to them, like Trip's just like panicking to get out of there, and it's quickly like revealed and they didn't actually go through it, they were about to go through it. And Trip gives this whole defensive speech about how, you know, my brother likes you, and kind of gives that as like the reason he couldn't go through with it, and says, you know, it's fucking bullshit sort of thing. So again, I think that's a subtle little thing where I think maybe he doesn't have the sort of experience with girls he likes to make out, so that's actually why he struggled to perform with Pearl. And so there was a couple of nice touches in there, even though it wasn't necessarily the most interesting thing in the episode. But there you have it, that's episode 4 of Little Fires Everywhere. So pretty enjoyable stuff, pretty interesting stuff. I'll try and get to episode 5 this week as well, put it up on the channel, because it's worth checking out, I think. And you can let me know what you've been thinking of it in the comments below, like and subscribe, all that stuff. And I'll be back with more new television content pretty soon. I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.